Hello, everybody. Welcome to Good Tips for Hard Times, where we find smart people who have great advice to help you get through your days. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm rocking my best 80s today. That's what I did this for our special guest. I don't know why, but I think she'd appreciate this outfit. It's a jumper, in case anyone's wondering. It's a one-piece jumper. It's not just like a cool shirt, which I think is just a different aesthetic that I needed everyone to be aware of this morning. But hey, I'm Anita Sarkeesian. I'm a media critic, public speaker, and the executive director of the Games and Online Harassment Hotline, which is a new emotional support resource for people who make and play games. The hotline is open. You know this. Please use it. It is here for you, and please tell all of your friends. All right, so I am excited to have my friend Sarah Elmaleh on today. She is an actor best known for her work in video games as the voice of the female freelancer in Anthem and Raider in For Honor, as Lizzie Carmine in Gears 5, and for many indie games, including Gone Home, Pyre, and After Party. What an amazing resume. Longtime director and co-host of the Indicate Awards. In 2019, she also co-founded the free multilingual online games conference, Game Dev World. As a games performance consultant and labor advocate, she acts as a bridge between actors and developers to foster deeper collaboration and best practices. Hello, Sarah.
Hello, good morning.
I'm so excited to have you on today.
Thank you for having me.
You know, these are good opportunities for me to like hang out with my friends that I can't hang out with anymore. We're just like, it's work and official, you know? That's how this
Yeah.
works.
We're talking about important stuff right now.
Important things. Yeah. Well, so I wanted to just like, start with kind of like hear a little bit more about how you got into voice acting. Like you have an incredible resume and you've done some amazing gigs, and I always get excited when I play a game and I'm like, I know that voice. But how did
you texted me about After Party, right?
I did, yeah. I think I texted like 5 people about After Party because somehow I'm like, oh, I know everybody in this. So that was a horrible humble brag. Sorry, everyone. I just was like, oh, I know a lot of people in this game, and it was delightful. So yeah, After Party, y'all. We did stream it on our Feminist Frequency Twitch channel, which you're currently on. Anyways, not the point. Let's talk about how you got into voice acting, partly because it's why we're talking to you and because it's very related to what we are talking about today. So your history with games, how you got into this space, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I started as an actor. I started acting. I was a dancer first, or I danced, and then I injured myself and then fell sideways into High School Musicals. And then from there, continued to study mainly theater through college. And after college, I moved to New York, and I was just kind of messing around. I was working with fellow students from Wesleyan University, which is where I went to college, doing theater and kind of just investigating other categories. But I had loved games from a really early age. I had several epiphanies around some of my favorite voice actors, and I kind of followed. I was a fan of voice actors in games since I was really small. I knew who they were and kind of followed them, and I was just like an IMDb person. So I kind of, when I landed in New York City, I started looking into voiceover and immediately found out that games were not in New York, and stayed there for another 7 years. Not the best move, but in that time I did do a lot of indies. But what happened was I didn't know where else to go to find games. So I went to PAX East, the first PAX East actually. It's a story I've told before, but basically I was at brunch with my mom, and I was near the convention center. And at the hotel, we're at the buffet, and she points out this person with a speaker badge, and she's like, "You should just go talk to him." She was like a good stage mom. She's the best kind of stage mom. No pressure, nothing mean, just pushed me beyond my comfort zone. This, however, I still probably wouldn't do or shouldn't do, but I did do. So I did go up and talk to this person, and it was Richard LaMarchand, who is the nicest person I could have just accosted at breakfast.
Absolutely, of all the people.
The lottery, I really truly believe, and because this is the origin point for all of my games, everything, it is just the best cosmic lottery ticket I ever won, was talking to Richard LaMarchand at this buffet, because he was so patient and kind and had time for me at his breakfast.
Do you want to just mention who he is for folks who aren't familiar with him?
He was the at the time he was the co-lead game designer on the Uncharted series. So for 1 through 3, he was co-lead. He was at Naughty Dog for a very, very long time, and now he's teaching at USC, and he has been for a minute. And he's just the most gracious. He also curates and sort of MCs the micro talks at GDC every year, which is one of my very favorite kind of recurring perennial talks. It's just like little 5-minute talks on very like heart forward and brain forward, but creative forward topics, usually just points of inspiration or insight that really awesome developers bring in like little chunks. It's great. Very inspiring. Yeah, and he's just the best. He's like the best person. So I lucked out. And then from this Uncharted, which I didn't have a PlayStation at the time. So I was like watching all of Uncharted, the first one on YouTube, and being like, this is great. This is like really good. These actors are amazing. And realizing they were collaborating, like looking into I was also a behind the scenes nerd. So I like would watch every single video I could possibly consume of like people in suits and balls and talking about stuff. But their like process was evidently so collaborative.
I'm sorry, people in suits and balls is
oh, I know.
It's such a funny way to describe mocap, but mocap looks so funny, right?
Yeah, it does look really fun. It looks really funny, which is part of why like this is so good, which I highly, we're not to an advice point yet, but like I highly recommend consuming every single clip you can find of behind the scenes stuff and performance capture footage, because if you want to do this work, because you're going to have to, like with everything, voiceover, it's funny because I say that, but I'm so unfazed because you just look silly no matter what. If you want to do games, you have to, for acting, you have to be so ready to look silly all of the time. Doesn't matter what kind.
I feel like we should have a whole episode dedicated to voice acting and acting in games. Like I feel now that we're having this, I'm like, I have so many questions for you, but we don't have time for that right now.
Oh,
so can we have you come back on and we'll do that?
Yeah.
Cool.
That's a good, you just know that you have to be super comfortable looking real stupid, then you're going to get a lot of mileage out of it.
Yeah, totally. Nice.
So, yeah. So anyway, but then the other big thing was that I found Richard on Twitter and I followed everyone that he was following. And so that was that was it. But I found baby castles that way. I found Killscreen that way. I found like communities, event communities and creator communities in New York City and elsewhere. I found criticism that I had not been aware of. It was the whole world to me was opened up of stuff that I hadn't known besides reading Penny Arcade. So like I was awakened. So then getting into the actual space was a combination of like kind of chatting with people on Twitter and then just attending as many events as I could, which is unusual. I mean, like the whole traditional voiceover pipeline and acting process felt like it was over here. I was like getting demos together and just building up, getting representation over here and doing that sort of a traditional pipeline. But my way into the space was unusual in that I was just like shaking hands and talking to devs at like conventions, especially indies, because indies are on the floor. They're showing their games. God bless them. They're standing there for hours and hours. But they're very, very accessible to you. And so it's very easy to like get a sense of someone's work and then immediately discuss it with them and just sort of make a connection. So doing indies that way was my way in. Eventually, I found representation in LA and had the good fortune of getting a good word in from both my manager at the time and Jennifer Hale, which counted for a lot at my agency. So then now I mainly get jobs through them.
Nice. Yeah, that sounds like quite the like. I don't like to glamorize hustling, and I don't like to glamorize that work, but you're like, okay, gonna put all the feelers out and do all the things that I can to figure out how to like break into this space, and that that worked for you. And I think networking gets a really bad rap, and we've talked about that on other episodes of this show. But that's such a big part of it, right? Is like you just met people, and you are a very social, personable human that is good at that sort of thing. So I'm sure that helped as well. But yeah, totally. So you landed in LA. And the strike.
Okay.
So
we're picking up where we last time on Sarah's whatever TV show.
Yeah. Just for folks who are tuning in, we're going to talk about a specific aspect of workers' rights in games. I think this is a really rich topic where we can discuss lots of different facets, and there's lots of different organizing happening, and we'll touch on a little bit of that. But really, we had Sarah come on to talk about the strike you were a part of during the union strike you were a part of for I'm going to let you explain it. But yeah, I just think that like the trajectory of your story is like you landed in LA and to like, you know, really blow up your career, like to
Right.
not in a bad way, in a good way. And then, and then
I think there was, I sort of joke a lot about wasting my time in New York in those 7 years, but I shouldn't, and in truth, I don't really think of it that way because all of those relationships that was me meeting, as far as networking, that was me finding my people, and that's how I saw it, really. It's like the way that you avoid a stigma or like a chore around networking is just instead of like, pushing yourself at people, you're trying to find your own people. And so I had really done that in that time. I think in the years since then, I've continued to do that. But in those 7 years, I made a lot of really meaningful relationships with developers, more developers than actors, actually. So I would say moving to LA is when I started to meet voice actors and feel a connection to my community, I would say, which is a huge, essential ingredient in any kind of labor framework, is feeling connected to each other. And voiceover can be kind of like niche-y or seem kind of niche-y or just sort of, it's like a same group of people. It can be hard, I think, from the outside for people to feel that sense of connection, but it's really urgent that they do, if they do voiceover, is to feel those invisible lines that connect you through your practice and your expression to each other. So that was like a big moment. Jennifer kind of started involving me in those conversations right as the strike was heating up. And I slowly started to sort of express myself in meetings and just sort of and learn. And I got a better sense for who was on the committee at the time and who was staff, like who was my union in person, which is obviously a privilege of being in LA, is getting to meet those sort of people and have that kind of contact. So yeah, it was like a process, a kind of an incremental process of becoming more involved and having the respect that I did for the people on the committee as actors and as people, listening to them speak. They were really insightful and experienced, and I felt good about their kind of ability and intentions. And same with staff. I mean, the staff that I was seeing, there was a turnover. There was like kind of a new generation of staff covering interactive that was like really motivated, really accessible, open to learning. I felt like my impression was that there was a need to understand the other side as we're gearing up for this big action, where I felt like a lot of voice actors didn't know developers personally the way that I did, at least on that scale and kind of in that scope across indies and AAA. So I felt like that was kind of something I had to offer. And I was starting to see, as I tried to offer it to be received well. So I was just really blessed with these ingredients of feeling connected to my union, ever more connected to my union, through like having, it comes down oftentimes to the people that you're working with. If you feel good about staff, I can promote contracts, including the new contract that I worked on in the course of the strike, for independent games, which is a funny inflection. I almost said like indie. I don't know why I said that, independent games. Sure. But yeah, if I didn't feel good about the staff that was going to field calls, and if I didn't feel good about the committee that was going to consider waivers, like if I didn't feel good about the people that I was working with, it would be more difficult. So it's funny because it's a big beast, a union of this size and age. But so often it just comes down to, and sometimes there are frustrations with that, trying to get it to move and shift and adapt and like get out ahead of a curve is difficult. But we can also be super agile depending on, if it's a small project, because of the people that I work with and that I know. So that discovery process was all sort of post 2015.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the union, it's SAG-AFTRA, right? And it was the voice
That's right.
actors is a section guild. I've been in a union before, but I'm just like, what are union words? Which I think is helpful to illuminate some of that. Yeah. So you all went on strike.
Yes.
And can you talk a little bit about like why you went on strike? Going as someone who has been in a union while on strike, like that's a really big decision to make. And that affects a lot of people during those moments. And so, what were you fighting for? That.
Yeah. It was so funny because I arrived and I was like, I'm going to do AAA games now. And they're like, no, you're on strike for 16 months. And I was like, okay.
Oh, no.
I was like, so I felt like mommy and daddy were fighting. I was very upset. I would feel differently now. I feel like I have a more grown up kind of appreciation of how these things work. But at the time I was like, so it is scary. And that's, communication is so essential. Communicating, making sure that you have true and vast membership support and the engagement, that reflects, that shows you that, is so key when you're trying to get everyone together on board with this thing. So yeah, it was a big move, and it was the longest strike in our union history. It was a really long
Oh,
time.
yeah.
Really long time. So the issues, I mean, there are several, you know, points of a platform that we were striking about. Most of which, many of which have improved in the years since, as a result of this. One was transparency, actors knowing more about the roles that they're going to do, both for safety reasons, personal kind of like comfort zone. And, you know, if your role is going to contain racism, you know, racist lines, dialogue, or circumstances, things like that, that would be like a really personal intent, you know, decision to make that could make or break your decision to do the job. That just seems like it would be fair to know. If you're reprising, or if you're, you know, performing a role in a major franchise, just things that either inhibit your ability to take the role in good conscience, or your agent to negotiate on your behalf adequately. So things like transparency, vocal stress was a huge issue, continues to be a huge concern. I mean, it just is something that you live with as particularly a games voice actor.
Can you explain what vocal stress actually is?
Vocal stress, someone compared it to basically vocal stunt work, which I think is really apt, because it's the kind of thing that you can do safely, but you run the risk of injuring yourself very badly. So it's yelling mostly, but it can also be hoarse whispering, but just anything that that potentially taxes your vocal cords in a way that could cause, you know, temporary or lasting damage. So with games, I mean, a lot of the stuff, well, with AAA games mainly, you know, there's a lot of yelling, a lot of screaming, a lot of dying by fire. Oh yeah.
Like all of the little sounds that you hear constantly when you're like shooting zombies, you're like, yeah, somebody made those sounds.
Right. And now that I've done more directing, I understand why the appreciation that there is a human body creating these sounds on the other side of the glass can sometimes escape your awareness. Because as a director, you're sitting there and you're thinking, and the actor is blind. They have no idea what's going on. And like the only thing they can rely on is like what you're able to say that tells them about where they are, what's happening, who they're talking to, all of that other stuff. So you are holding the vastness and the detail of the imagined game world in your head, and then listening very carefully to hear if the performance that you're getting and the lines that you're getting or the delivery that you're getting is fits into that. So your brain is kind of back here, like holding this thing in your head, and then you open your eyes and someone's like, "Can I take a break?" And you're like, "Yes, oh my God, yes, please."
Yeah.
So that's something that actors have to be comfortable advocating for. You know, it's twofold, or it's both sides, right? You know, the director needs to remember that a human body made of cells and tissue is producing this stuff, and that has limits, and requires rest. And then it's also on the actor I think it's a very sort of grown up, I don't know why grown up is like I'm a kid, like grown up, but it is like a mature artists and workers, you know, calling to advocate for themselves and to say, I need a break now. Like the more I do that, the better my performances become, the longer I'll be able to work, which is essential. I think that's a main sustainability, I think is the key concern that a union is steward of, because so much in the rest of the world and in a market is designed to extract work now, not forever. And actors and individual workers want to work for a long time. They love their work, but they want to work for a long time. So those are, I think, the opposing frameworks that it's why it's so essential for unions to exist and to do the work that they do, is to fight for sustainability on behalf of all its members.
Yeah.
So
and it feels like I want to ask you about like the secondary payment aspect of the strike, but I do want to just acknowledge that, and especially because you led with this, is that oftentimes strikes are you know, it's not just money. And I feel like people who are anti-union or like don't really care about workers' rights always think it's just like, pay us more. And like, yes, people need to be paid more, just like across the board in most industries, or they're not being paid enough. But that unions are also, hopefully, you know, not all unions are the best, but are here to support their workers in terms of safety, in terms of sustainability, like you're saying, right? Yes. And I think that's the piece that I think is really, really critical and such a huge part of the games industry, like, or tech, that the conversations around tech unionizing, right? It's not as much about money as it is like, these are not okay working conditions. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, oh, sorry. So the other component of the strike was secondary payments. Did you want to explain what that means?
That's right. So, historically, and now we are just sort of facing a world that is going to have to replace this model, I think. I don't know how long it will bear up anymore, but traditionally speaking, actors, it can be very difficult to make a living off of session fees. which means you're paid for the amount of time it takes to record something. And just the way that these things, for example, if you do an ad, that takes an hour, maybe, you know, but the value that it represents to the company that uses it is much greater because what they pay for is an ad buy where they run the thing a million times or whatever it's going to be, and then they generate, you know, profit from the interest in their product. So the way that our contract was traditionally structured for that was to get paid every time it airs, and this is commensurate with what you're bringing in on the back of this thing that you've created that I've been a part of. That have been a very human, you know, the human voice is a deeply intimate, it's just such a direct line to another person. It's a really powerful instrument, I think. You know, just people respond very instinctively and viscerally to another human voice. Part of why I love what I do. But yeah, so anyway, so making those would be residuals if it's every time that it airs, that kind of thing. So that has been, you know, a really like kind of a foundational, you know, way for an actor to make what one might call a middle class living over time, as opposed to session fees or getting paid every time that you work for just that time that you're working. Now, games have only ever paid session fees. You know, even animation obviously had secondary payments as well. So this was a huge issue. Actors who are used to in many other categories, if not most, if not all, I would have to check with my contacts history there. Other categories have some kind of secondary payment structure built in. So within the acting community, the idea that games wouldn't offer some kind of secondary structure was baffling and frustrating for a very long time. From the tech side, or from the game side, they're out of a tech kind of culture. I don't think that at the time they saw themselves as much as part of the arts or part of an entertainment history as they did a tech history. And so this felt foreign to them. I don't want to speak out of turn. I think that the precedent of rather than the money was more concerning to them, and the prospect, especially of publishers, I think we're past it now, so I'm just going to kind of put this out there. But I think that publishers were afraid that they might have to share secondary payments with developers if this precedent was created legally with another part of the games creation community. And so they fought for it like it was a matter of survival. Which is why the strike went on so long. Oh yeah, like it was life or death, I think, to them is how it really felt because of the way that they resisted it. So, so what we did end up with was a bonus payment per session worked. So now for the full budget, for the interactive media agreement, you get an additional bonus for every session that you work on the same project. Now during that time, we came up with Crispin Freeman, who's a very experienced voice actor. In games and animation and other things, mentioned that they wanted to create a low budget contract, which I had been wanting forever. Looking from the outside and being new to the union, I was like, I love indies. This is my background. This is my love. I think they're experimental, creative, exciting, provocative, really fulfilling work for any actor. And so the idea that they weren't covered jurisdictionally by a union contract was worrisome to me. So when he suggested it, I was like, yes, let's do this. And so I reached out. I did lots and lots of feedback sessions with one-on-one as a group over email with indies that I trusted and had worked with to tune that contract. And that contract does have a sort of a secondary payment structure that is pegged to success. Bless you.
I muted myself and went off camera so nobody knew that I just sneezed, but that's okay. Oh. I keep doing that. I'm like, I should just not.
I was like, it's to be impolite if I don't say anything.
Yeah, no, I got it.
Okay.
Please continue.
Sorry, I didn't know that you were doing massive streaming jujitsu. Okay. So yes, so actually one of the things that we were to a bit of union talk. So the interactive media agreement is a collective bargaining agreement, which means that we sit down with a representative group of producers, and that agreement has to be negotiated and ratified by both parties to be used and implemented. What we did with the low budget agreement was what you would call a promulgated agreement, which was just that the union cooked this thing up, and of course we took as much feedback as we could. And then we just offered it, and you can just use it. It didn't have to be sit down and formally negotiated. It's just the kind of thing where it's like, take it or leave it. I don't know, So we released that during the strike, actually, I think. So yeah, and there was also a promulgated agreement that the producers could use. I think it's important to point that out, is that we put out a contract reflecting the things that we were asking for. And what during the strike, if you wanted to do that, we could work on it. Like, you're like, if you want to pay, whatever. And there were buyout, versions. I think a lot of people get leery of sort of way after the fact accounting, but there were buyout versions of the secondary payments that gave you a discount if you wanted to just pay that up front and not worry about it later. I worked on one of those, at least, for a project. And so there were other options for work during the strike that were just like, hey, if you're cool with what we're asking for, we can do this.
Yeah, nice. So do you feel good about the resolution of the strike?
How do I feel? I do. I mean, it was definitely a concession. I mean, it wasn't what we hoped for as far as the secondary payment structure. I know that our committee gave it everything that they had. I don't feel disappointed in the amount of effort and sort of like intelligence that was brought to the table on our side. And we were just fighting a really difficult culture issue. So there's that. But I mean, the nice thing is that around a lot of these issues, the conversation has improved. Awareness has increased around things like vocal stress, especially. Relationships have improved again, because I think the staff is and our committee work really hard and work in good faith. I think that the experience of working with the union, I think, has improved a great deal. And I'm very proud of that fact, and I want people to know that people are available to answer their questions and to get back to them, to be responsive. That matters to me quite a lot. And I think that's true. So there has actually, and then of course there's been a shift in labor awareness in general, I think, in our space, through that strike, or either, if not because of it, certainly after, coincidentally.
Yeah. There's actually a question in chat related to this, if I can bring it up. Jordy asks, do other people in the games industry view voice actors as outsiders or with suspicion, like they're labor tourists of sorts? And there's a follow-up comment from Jordy that says, I asked because unionizing is so rare for other workers in the industry, so I wonder how they reacted to voice actors being in a union.
So this was like my big, like, if there were a movie of my labor thing, this would be the moment where I was like, guys, I have something to say, like, in the middle of like the worker.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, I'm gonna make a comment. Ooh. But yes, I think that there's reasons for that. Not like intentional reasons, but like circumstantial, because we work and I fight against this cultural issue beyond just labor concerns all the time, just as a creative concern, because actors are isolated from the rest of the process. So we come in, we're isolated from each other. I mean, we come in, it's just us in a booth. We have one lifeline, like I said, a director or whoever else wants to be in the room who should or shouldn't be there. And so, of course, like, we don't have that, like I was saying, this issue of camaraderie and the sense of feeling connected is something that you have to fight to kind of get people to see and feel. And the games process for actors vis-a-vis other developers really inhibits that, just absolutely inhibits that. I mean, we're like literally in an isolation cell from the rest of from the process. We're not on an open office plan where we can just scoot by and see if you want to get lunch. Like, we don't see each other. And so, of course, it's harder to feel like we're connected and part of the same process. But I think because we are all striving to express and create this thing together, and we care about our work and creating good work, that we are connected. It's just a question of whether we see and feel that. So I think that the publishers, the producers really benefited from that perception that developers, there's a sense of like, this is a finite pie and you can't have this piece. I don't get that piece. I work many more hours than you do, and I deserve a piece of this, and I just get a salary. And we're like, we come in for a few hours, and because we're good at what we do, we give you content very quickly, and then we go away. And for us, we're like, we don't get a salary. Like, we have to cobble together all this stuff. And so this structure was how we kind of managed to do that normally. So it was like a very much a two sort of, dissonant payment structures and ways of making a living kind of fighting with each other. But I think if there had been a more, and maybe this has happened since then, there's an awareness that, oh no, if I get this piece of the pie, now you get this piece of the pie. The publishers got that, but I'm not sure that it was successfully communicated and discussed in that way. Maybe it was, but in the larger space. And so they benefited from people seeing that as division instead of solidarity. When I think if it had been perceived as solidarity, who knows what would have happened and what would have been possible for other people after that.
Yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely.
I don't know if that answers your question, but like there are working condition related reasons why that is, I think, true. I think the underlying truth of it is a bit deeper and the opposite, but that's just me. Did I
Yeah.
answer your question?
We will find out in the chat. I think that was a
Let me
good.
know.
I think that was interesting, for sure. So, yes, the answer is yes. Jordy says thank you. You answered the question. um,
Good, good.
I'm wondering if you can. I'm thinking about how you alluded to this earlier about how like labor organizing in games, even the discussion of it is new, right? Like it's just in the last few years that I think has been something that is being taken a little more seriously. You know, we've seen all of these stories about like labor exploitations in companies, right? These exposés that come out of these big companies, right? That are these games that we love, that are amazing, and we're realizing that there's like a ton of exploitative labor practices in making those games. And another thing I was thinking about in regards to this is Kickstarter just unionized, and that was I think the first tech company to unionize, or one of the first. It definitely set a precedent, and it was extremely difficult. It was
Yeah,
extremely contentious. People got
yeah,
fired.
yeah.
Like it was a real tough battle for them as a very small tech company. And so I'm wondering, like, how do you? I guess I'm wondering what your thoughts are around the increase in conversations around labor organizing in games, how it might relate to some of the experiences you had with the union, which was, an established union that has experience with striking and bargaining and all of those kinds of things. But it moving into this other space of workers' rights in an environment that doesn't know anything about unions and is like, frankly, as most bosses are and like owners of companies don't want their employees to unionize because collective bargaining is too powerful sometimes, right?
Right. Yeah. Right. I mean, again, it comes down to the people that you're working with. I mean, I suppose that there are unions that may or may not negotiate in good faith, which is something that you, as part of that union, have to hold to account. I mean, if someone's misrepresenting you, your desire to work or your whatever your needs actually are, or sort of overstepping those things in a way that doesn't seem to benefit everyone really, then that's something you have to work the mechanisms within your union to try and like bring it back to reflecting membership's desires and good faith goals. But yeah, so it's interesting. I feel very lucky to have such an established union. But I mean, it started in the same conditions. Like we are at the beginning point in this space of the same story as every union that has ever happened, because it came out of exploitation and a lack of awareness around how this works. And workers decided that they needed to change things. They needed to present an opposing force to something that unchecked will just continue to extract and isn't looking at their individual, well-being. Whether that's, an innocent lack of awareness or not, truly. So I think that there is a role in which, I when there was the big roundtable at GDC for Game Workers Unite as a discussion, which was kind of a big deal. This was a couple years ago now. I made sure that one of our SAG-AFTRA organizers attended. And so there is now a long, years running kind of back and forth discussion and relationship to sort of a communication between this established union and organizers who have experience organizing, with, sort of burgeoning, because I can't, it's funny because I can't organize developers. I can't. Whatever threat I pose is like just non-existent unless there is, a group of workers who are willing and able to do some really scary coordinating long-term work to advocate for themselves. So I can only share my experience with my union and offer, but I can insist that we offer our resources and our insight and our experience available, and our example available to newer, groups that want to follow in a similar path. So I think there's a relationship to be had, and just is existing right now, currently, between established unions and newer efforts and initiatives in a new space. Which is lucky. I think we can, again, because we are part of the same product that is made, it all involves our work and our expertise and our, long-term, hard developed skills. and passion. So yeah, I mean, I hope that and I feel confident that our union will continue to kind of share itself and what it has to offer, even though we can't directly, again, organize workers that aren't, doing it themselves for themselves. So yeah, I mean, I think I'm just thrilled. I'm just excited that, I mean, it's scary. That's the thing, is like, you have to remember, it's like really scary work, and it's hard. And this is why I call myself an advocate and not like an activist or an organizer, because that's different work. And all I get to do is just be like, yay, my experience has been nice. And like the actual work of doing this is quite, serious.
I will push back on that slightly, because you were doing activism organizing work in your union for your strike. So like you do have experience with that, even though just, I'm going to give you that. I'm going to give you that. Well, but you can be an advocate for a larger, I'm going to tell you how to feel about this.
Okay.
Too often we undervalue our contributions and that sort of thing. So I think that, your experience as someone in a union actively and have gone through a strike and is incredibly valuable. And so, I think that the experiences that you and the other members of your union went through is incredibly valuable to the larger conversations about unionizing games workplaces and that sort of thing. It's different. Starting a union is a totally different structure, a totally different beast. It's scary as shit. But
truly. And I that's the thing, is I just have so much respect and reverence for people who are willing and able to do it, that I just hold that very foremost in my mind. My mom, actually, just to shout out to Mama, she was in the first flight attendants union. So she was treasurer of the first, for American Airlines. She was working at the time. And like, I have, my history with my union and my unionizing experience has been of like an almost insistent, innocent, good faith version. I'm like, I'm going to find people who care about treating us well, and we're going to focus on each other. And then we're just going to set boundaries of people who don't want to work with us, that have bad intentions or just don't care about what I need. And I'm like, that's my journey, is like finding the good people, working something out that works for everybody, going home, yay, happy. My mom was like in a union fighting against, companies that had contractual obligations to keep her a sex object. Like, she had weight restrictions, she had makeup restrictions, she was not supposed to wear her like wedding ring. Like, this is the time of like Pan Am advertising, like the bird with the golden tail. I mean, like, this is like really crazy stuff. Excuse me, ableist language, but like really wild stuff. And she, that was like more of a fight. There are, I think, within every, if again, focusing on what I can share is really like how you relate to your union, how you see yourself within it, how you connect your heart to the other people that you care about and that work alongside. And if you can't defend if you're less comfortable advocating for yourself and setting a boundary, think about defending your best friend who's working next to you and making sure that they have a high floor of treatment. Because I can't, like, it's, again, to your point about like negotiating for ever more pay, agreed. Blah. You're like, no, like every person's just going to negotiate up. I don't get a quote for games. I'm a scale, which is like, the lowest payment actor. And that's what I get paid. But what you do want to do as a union is to insist on a floor of treatment below which no one gets, slips through the cracks into abuse or exploitation. So my side of things is more like, feel connected to each other, defend the person working next to you. And then I like create new opportunities and positive relationships. There's going to be a need for warriors. I'm like the gooey happy person who like just moves in good faith and makes it seem not scary. And then there are, for the bad faith people that you have to deal with, maybe you need people who are willing to fight. So I think it takes all kinds, is what I'm saying.
This is a total aside that just made me laugh about you being a gooey, warm person and me not being that person. Is someone was putting on an event. They're trying to change an in-person event to a digital event, as everyone is doing. And they're like, yeah, this year's been really hard. So like, we want a keynote that's like, optimistic. And I was like, cool. I'm not. That's not me. That's not what I do. Nobody comes to me for that. Why don't you just like invite me back next year and we'll sort that out.
I love that. I love that self-awareness. I love it so much.
Yeah. Yep.
I think that's how we do. You learn to do that in your profession, and to make peace with the thing. I think a lot of young actors especially they're like, I want to do everything. And of course we want to play and do lots of different things because it's stimulating and satisfying. But like eventually you're just going to be like, I'm not going to be Harrison Ford. I'm just not. I don't know why I picked that, because it's obviously a really wild and,
It's fine.
I mean, that's really true. You know what? The point is,
epic
true.
career. Harrison Ford's epic career.
Inarguable. Yeah, which I also just love. But it's actually, as an actor, he really like settled into accepting himself as a specific kind of tool, and he was a really like, I love that actually about him. Now that I've used that as an example, he was just like, I'm your action guy. I've got some limits. I tried regarding Henry. It didn't work out. I'm this guy. And by all means, like by all reports, he sounds like someone who just treats it like a craft. He works hard. He's not pretentious. It's a good way to be. Anyway. So you make that peace in yourself as you mature as an artist of like, what you're going to do and what you're going to try for and what you're going to settle for and what you aren't. And I think that's true too of labor, is you're just like, you're going to be okay letting go those jobs that want to exploit you as an actor and then as a group. You're like, at a certain point, you work to make contracts that are as inclusive and inviting as possible for as broad a swath of work as you can. And people who just want to give you like that much less, you just let them go. Like you just let them go. And and like,
which is easier to do when you have a union behind you or people behind you to like, yes, support you through that. Because for some people, I imagine like there are moments where it's like, I can't give up any work. That's really challenging. Right. And so how do you uplift everybody in a space to be able to be treated fairly and actually have work?
I think and again, this is why it takes all kinds in every kind of way, because you have the people who can take those hits, who lead that fight. They're out front. They're the face of the effort. They start to put their foot down. People alongside them who can afford to lose a little bit of work or a lot of work could put their foot down. And those are the people that you have starting to build this shield, and behind which the people who have less who are more vulnerable to that, will be lifted up by that action. Yeah. So I mean, I think that's why I'm lucky to be able to say the things that I do and to set those boundaries. And I know other actors who have said to me, not to whatever, I guess humble brag, but they're like, it's really been inspiring, or it's been interesting and kind of changed how I see work by seeing you not do non-union work. Like it made me think about that step myself. And like, so there are folks who will take that step when and if they can, and then without judging the folks who have to take the work that they have to take. But that's how you do it, is you put your strong folks out front who can afford to take some hits. Hopefully you have enough of them to create a precedent that then lifts everybody up into that work and that new standard together. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
So maybe as like a nice little wrap up. So if folks who play games, care about games, or in games communities, care about labor organizing, but maybe not, in an environment in which they can do that work, are there things that, people on the sidelines can do to support some of these efforts? I don't know why I phrased that so weird. Here we are.
So we're talking not developers themselves, but fans.
Yeah, I think so. Like I think that there's oftentimes the folks who are like, I love these products, right? I love the art and the craft of this stuff, but it like feels gross to maybe play a game where the labor was exploited or whatever. Like how can we as a collective sort of start supporting people who are in these environments?
I feel like my example is really, I don't know how well this answers your question, but to me, I just focus on what the individual group of developers in that experience are kind of advocating for and asking for. So, I mean, the public opinion and expressing support by itself is a hugely powerful and significant piece of this, fight, if you want to call it that. But I mean, PR is serious, and companies, are pay attention to these things. And so the shift in just the comments about their, favorability toward collective action is certainly one step. Just being vocal in your support, and the fact that you say that you are and are actually listening to developers when they advocate for themselves, whether it's, in general or in a specific action. I mean, if it's the riot walkout or if it's the voltage strike, we had our first successful strike in the games space by game developers, which is huge. So like just paying attention to what is coming out of those communities and saying what support they need from you. Putting your ear to the ground, I think, is the best thing I can say, because it may change. I'm not sure that I could speak for developers, in saying what they need. There are also, there are initiatives, like I said, Game Workers Unite. They have and code CWA. So now CWA, which is Communication Workers of America, has a campaign, which is a big established union, has a campaign led by Emma Kinema, who is an experienced organizer with Game Workers Unite, is leading that campaign, or part of that initiative. So there are organized bodies that you can pay attention to, that you can follow on Twitter, or like just listen for, who are communicating with these groups and helping them and providing resources and muscle, elbow grease. So follow those initiatives and just sort of keep your ear to the ground and just express your support and the fact that you are paying attention, holding companies to account. That's the best thing I can say, because I worry that, again, I'm not a developer, so I'm just trying to say, that's what I do. That's what I do, is I pay attention to that, and then I signal boost it.
Yeah, totally. That makes sense a lot. Public pressure, cultural change, all of that is hugely significant. Yeah, totally. You're a delight. You want to come back on and talk about voice acting?
Sure.
Yeah, let's do that. I feel like we could do a whole segment about that. So that'll be really fun
and silly.
We could talk about the suits and the balls,
Sure. Oh, yeah. All them balls.
Yeah. If folks want to learn more about you and your work, where might they do that?
They can follow me on Twitter if they want, if that's a thing they do. I am Selmaleh, SELMALEH. And then I am also SarahElmaleh.com. I don't know why this is what my website is.
Is this what a website is?
This is my website.
Perfect.
Yeah. So, I'm in those places.
Great.
Yeah, I'm around.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you all for joining us and tuning into this episode of Good Tips for Hard Times. We really appreciate it. Thanks to all the mods for keeping this space friendly. And if you want to watch a video of this or any of our other episodes, you can do that at the Games Hotline YouTube channel, which is surprisingly at youtube.com/gameshotline. The Games Hotline is open. Please use it. Please share about it. We want to be available to help folks as needed. And if you want to help us keep it open, you can go over to gameshotline.org/donate and chip in a few bucks. You can join us next week when we have guest host Kishana Gray talking to Gino Greco about, I've totally butchered that name, I think. I'm so sorry. We'll figure that out. About community moderation, which I think is a really important piece of games industry environments and communities. So we'll be talking about making online spaces friendlier, safer, and more welcoming. So join us next week right here, twitch.tv/femfreak. You're here, so you know that. Bye.